What's up guys, Mixed by Johnson here, back with another episode of Mixed Up, the show where I show you how to mix down tracks on Logic Pro X. And this is part 2 of the video that you guys might have watched last week. If you haven't, I'll link it in the description, where me and Young Soul basically did a beat breakdown. And now today we're going to be doing the mix breakdown of Clue's track, My Fears. Let's jump straight into it, let's go. Okay, cool. So as you would have watched on the previous video, we had Young Soul on here and he basically broke down exactly how he created the beat for it. Now we've jumped over onto my system and I'm basically going to be doing a breakdown of how I mixed the record, including the vocals. So let's just give you guys a little taste of what it is if you don't remember already.
Young Soul.
I've been down but I managed it. I faced my fears and I challenged it. My heart grew stronger when you damaged it. I smiled through the pain, that's how I balanced it. Smoking on gelato, I can pattern it.
Crazy, crazy record. We've got Wrecker on there. There was Swiss, obviously Clue, and Wretch 32, which for me was a brilliant moment because I always loved Wretch 32, especially when I was younger, and it was a dream to be able to mix his vocals and, you know, have that credit on my list. So yeah, big moment for me as well. But the overall record was so brilliant, and me and Soul decided, you know, I think we need to do like a beat breakdown and a mix breakdown of this and put it on YouTube, just so you guys can see exactly how these tunes are made from like start to finish almost. But let's get into it. So today I've got the project file up here. As you can see, I've got the references. There's 2 references there. And then I have the beat stems all in one folder. Now, normally I would separate the drums and then the rest of the instrumentals, but for whatever reason, I decided not to. I don't know if I was being lazy or not or whatever that day, but yeah, everything's in one folder, which is a summing folder. So that means that if I needed to, I can edit that beat as a whole. And then we've got the vocal folder here. Now, full transparency, I mixed this last year, quite a while ago. My mix template and the way that I mix has changed quite a lot since then. So I will be doing like an updated video on my new mix template, and I potentially might even be selling it. So if you guys are interested in that, make sure you leave a like and ask for it in the comments, and I'll make sure that I deliver that to you guys. And as well, linked in the description, if you guys are interested, will be my recording template as well. So you can see exactly how we record these records and get a similar style to how we record these records straight from the jump. Just, you know, all the plugins are already laid out for you, and you can record your music exactly how I record my music, because it is the same template that I use. But let's get into it. So today we're basically just we're not going to be going too much into sort of like the technical of what I did here, what I did there. We're going to basically just break down all the stems. I'm going to show you what I done, and then if there's any sort of techniques that we talk about in this video that you're like, oh, I would love to know more about that, again, leave it in the comments. I'll be sure to make a video on any techniques that you want more discussion on at a later video. But let's get cracking. Firstly, we've got the beat stems here. So if we look, I'll solo the beat and we will, let's loop a section of the instrumental. Let's loop the hook. We'll play for it. So firstly here, you can see the kick I have here. Now, the kick's coming quite hot, so I've had to push it down. I had to do a bit of gain staging. I tried to not mess with the sound as much as possible because I want to control that essence. My goal is to sort of act as like a transparent window between the idea of the song and then finishing it. So I want the idea and I want the feeling and I want the vibe to come through. My goal is to literally just, you know, make that sound as big as possible and, you know, help them achieve the overall vibe of the song. So I'm not ever trying to do anything too crazy, too creative, unless it's needed and I hear it. But as you can see here, I've just got standard Logic EQ up on here with a bit of top and tail, and I've boosted around 62 Hertz just to help bring out that punch of the kick a little bit. And then if we move on to this bus, so there's no compression on the kick or anything like that. Again, I will say, you know, we'll probably say this a lot, my template has changed slightly. There is a little bit more involved and I do mix in a slightly different way now, but I will do an updated video on that for you guys soon. I basically have here on this bus a parallel compression set up. So this is basically squashing the daylights out of the kick and just helping us get like a nice punchy clear sound from that kick, kind of like backing it up. And then this other bus here is going nowhere, and you'll sort of see why later, because I basically am side chaining it to the 808 a little bit. not in a way that I want the 808 to sort of like duck, almost like EDM music, but just very quickly duck at the very low end. So when you get the impact of the kick, we're not getting a layer of like the big low end as well, which is gonna save us headroom and dynamics in the long run. And it stops the basses from like covering the kick. So that's the kick. Then we're gonna go into the snare. Again, very simple, didn't really mess with it too much. Just a small EQ, didn't feel the need to. I mean, a lot of these sounds have been processed already, compressed already, EQ'd already, you know, numerous times because they're samples. You know, we're dealing with trap and drill and stuff like that. These are all like heavily processed samples. So if I don't feel like it needs it, I'm not gonna add it on. If it was a live kit, for instance, it might be a different story. And then we're gonna have the hi-hats. It's gonna be the same story, just a bit of EQ, just getting rid of any unnecessary audio in there just to make sure that we are getting the most amount of headroom at the back end as we possibly can. And then I have just done a little high shelf here just to help bring those highs and give it a little bit of like glisten to the record. Now this is where it starts to get a little bit more complicated. We've got our first bass here. And basically I've done my first EQ, so I've removed a lot of the highs. I've shaved off a little bit of the low end as well that I didn't feel like it was necessary. Maybe it was muddying the record a bit too much. And then I have a first stage of compression, just dropping it down, just trying to get a more consistent sound out of the 808 because it does move slightly. So as you can see, as it like bends down, we're bringing it back up so we get a much more consistent feeling from the 808, which sometimes people want, sometimes people don't. But for me, I wanted that 808 just to be in the front and aggressive throughout the whole song, which is, if you watch the previous video, one of Soul's comments that he made that he loved about my mix and how I managed to keep that bass so big. Next, we got the old traditional, very light, you guys will see this, sausage fattener, you know, gets a lot of polarizing kind of topics online, but I just like it. You know, it gives me a bit of saturation, gives me a bit of color. You know, I try not to overuse it. As you can see, is like literally barely, oh, I just moved it even 1% there. Barely anything going on there, and just running it through and just giving it that real grit and body. Then after that, I have my sidechain compressor going on. So I've just used a multi-band and I'm literally just ducking everything below 100. And you can see by 6 dB every time the kick hits, right? Which is just allowing that kick and that 808 to sort of like glue together. And then we're not getting like a massive peak on the master output where the bass and the kick are all happening at once. So I'm just sort of balancing the two. I have changed this technique slightly. I've adopted the Jason Joshua technique where I use Soothe 2 now. But before I didn't have Soothe, this was sort of like my makeshift version of that. You should definitely check out some of Jason Joshua's videos if you want to learn more about getting like massive, big sub frequencies in your mix and just getting huge sounding records, because he's like the go at it. And then here I have, because it was quite like a top endy bass, I just scooped a bit of the mids out and then upped the highs just to give it a little bit more width in that low mid area of the record, just to help, you know, thicken it out, make it a bit more spacious. I didn't want to do it down here. I don't want to do the whole bass because you want sort of like the low end to be mono, so it feels direct and it feels powerful. But then as you move up, you can be a bit more playful with, you know, the frequencies that you're spreading out across your mix. So this sort of like helped widen the bass and again, lean into the fact how big it sounds in the record. Next up, we got the other bass. So this bass basically plays consistently throughout the whole song. And it, you know, it's important to try and level these out, and so they don't sound like crazy when they're being played together. If we listen now, they were working together, they're working in tandem. That can be difficult to achieve sometimes when you're layering basses, but the most important thing is that as this main bass comes in, it takes over and it sounds more powerful. So you're getting that sort of like dynamic movement in the low end throughout the song. So as it's out, it's still there, but it's a bit more thin and it's a bit more hollow. And then as the other bass comes back in, you'll hear it builds up and gets much more powerful. See what I'm saying? I would have been basically done a more similar action on this. So we've got just a quick top and tail EQ, again, just shaving off any frequencies that I don't really want. There's a slight tiny sliver of boost around 100. Maybe I was just trying to bring out that frequency a little bit more. And then we got a bit of compression again. Just very light this time. This bass is a lot more consistent in the sound. If you can see, it looks like, you know, it's probably already been compressed and all sorts of things. So it didn't need as much, but it was just there, probably more acting as like a gain boost. Same settings exactly with the sausage fattener, and then we've got the multi-band. So these are two different multi-bands that I've set up. One's doing the kick over here, And then this one is sidechain to this. So when this first bass comes back in, the bass that we were just talking about, the bigger bass, it's gonna cut out a lot of the low end of this bass. So again, helping them not clash. So as you can see, when it's not being played, it's not reacting. So it's filling up those subs that we wanted. And then when this comes in, I'm basically prioritizing the other bass's subs to run through and cut through, so we're not getting like this overlapping mesh of like too low end. Do you know what I mean? Because that's how you're gonna get a muddy mix. So that's basically how I've done that. So there's two. Again, I would use Soothe 2 now if I was to achieve that now, but you know, my makeshift version with the multi-band by Fab Filter, which is, again, it's a brilliant multi-band, so you can achieve a lot with it. So this is like the first sort of like ghostly sound that you would have seen Soul talk about in the first part of the breakdown. I don't know why it's up here. Maybe I moved it when I would have mixed it, because I would have normally started with like some of the other sounds first. But yeah, again, very simple, just low cut, high cut, keeping it easy, keeping it simple. We got a little bit of compression here, just, you know, bringing out, and basically my goal was I wanted that tail to sort of come out. So I've compressed it and like kept the auto gain on. So I'm compressing like as it comes in, which so it's going to smooth out. So when the tail then comes out, it doesn't sound like the tail is just disappearing into the record, because I wanted that feeling of space and air to come through. And then we have the next sound, which is this keyboard lead. Ah, that's the sound, the keyboard typing sound that Soul was talking about. Again, I haven't really done too much of that. It's all about gain staging, making sure it's in the right place, and I've topped and tailed it with an EQ quickly. And then on top of that, we've got the Scottish lead, which to me is like one of the main parts of the song. It's like the most recognizable sound. It happens consistently throughout the record. And we've got the top and tail, a small bit of compression as always, just to like level it out. And then I've done a mid-side EQ here just to open that up in this top area. Now, one of the main reasons why I would have done this is, one, I'd like it to be wide in that space, and two, this is where a lot of like the clarity of the vocals would have been coming through all of the characters, you know, sort of taking on a average of the different rappers. And I've opened up that pocket, so this sound's not going to be clashing with anyone at any point whilst they're trying to rap, and we're going to lose clarity. So it opens it up. So now the Scotland sound is coming out of the sides, and then any of the rappers can come down the center with like the drums and the bass. Just this little technique that I like to add to create space and to stop clashing of frequencies. A reverse crash, again, my project management on this was terrible. Sort of know the drill with that. These are all perks of the record. Another little vocal chop there. Here I've put fresh air on it because I think it was a little bit dull at the time, and then I put an extra layer of like reverb on top. So again, I wanted that like ghostly sort of feeling in the record, so I wanted it to sort of like translate over and be a bit more spacey. And then we've got a Serum lead here. Let's have a listen to this. This is again one of the main, most recognizable sounds. This is sort of like the arpeggiator that's like bringing the space and the time, like the pacing to the record. You know, again, EQ, compression, all sort of things, just balancing it out, keeping it nice. And then the main important thing is gain staging. I panned it slightly over because I think Soul had it going one way and I wanted it to feel more central in the middle. So I've sort of compensated it back the other way a little bit. And then here I've got this transient designer. This was just so, again, I wanted it to be a little bit more attacking with less of a sustain. As you can see here, I've like boosted the attack and then slowed the sustain out because I wanted it to feel quick and I wanted it to feel powerful to bring the pacing of the song together. So I've added that transient shaper on there just to sort of like help that cut through and feel a bit more tight. It's like a backup synth here. Again, added a bit of fresh air to it. And Valhalla, just leaning into that space concept of things. We've got another Serum lead, which I haven't used, funny enough. Maybe that was a duplicate. And this is the main like top lead for the hook. This is what separates the hook from the rest of the verses. This only comes in when Clue comes in. So I've layered it quite high in the mix, added a bit of compression to really drive it through, so it's cutting through over everything else, and done some small boosts as well on the EQ just to like help it in certain pockets of frequency that I wanted it to cut through the mix on. And then we have, what do we have here? What's this sound? Ghostly choir sound again, just leaning into that air, bit of fresh air, giving it a little bit of top end and mid, because a lot of the sounds I felt were a little bit dull in like as they were sent to me. And then some Valhalla, and then yeah, finally we just have some final perks and Young Soul's beat tag and stuff like that. So that was pretty much the beat, as you can see. Quite simple, didn't have to go too much. Again, you know, props to Young Soul. Like when you're dealing with brilliant producers, you shouldn't need to do too much. I think that's where a lot of mix engineers can go wrong sometimes, is they feel like they need to do all of this stuff. And what they end up doing is over mixing the record. It's all about just leveling and prioritizing the right things, and then creating the space for the vocalist to sit on, and making sure when you then go take it to master, you're in like a decent place of like headroom and dynamics to be able to just pull that idea out and like have it loud and compete with all the records. So I won't go through all of these vocals because we're going to be here, you know, all day. But, you know, what we'll do is, because I already have records where I talk about Clue's vocal chain, I'm sure I do. So what we'll do for this one is we'll talk about Wretch. Again, because I'm a big fan of Wretch, not that I'm a massive fan of Clue as well. Me and Clue have been working for a long, long time, but I never got to work on Wretch's vocals. So I'll talk about what I did on his vocals when I break down his chain, rather than breaking down all of this stuff, because it's going to be a long old video. But if you want it, let me know in the comments and I'll happily do it. But Wretch's vocal, as you can see here, this is the vocal here. I've done a lot of like chops throughout it. This would have just been like breaths and stuff like that I think needed to go. Some breaths would have been left in there, some not, like just jarring ones really that poking out of the record. Sometimes I'll cut them out, sometimes I won't. As you can see, it's sort of like random throughout. Sometimes I'll use automation and just duck them. It really depends on what I'm trying to achieve and like the vibe of the song. But you know, my go-to is sort of like remove, because I just, yeah, a lot of breaths I think make the song sound unpolished and unfinished. And as you can see here as well, he's the only one that doesn't have like extras like stabs or ad-libs or anything, which again I think is credit to Wretch, because he's such a brilliant lyricist. He doesn't need to rely on stuff like that, do you know what I mean? And I much prefer getting like a really strong vocal sent by itself and just making that stand up at attention in the mix than have to sort of like rely on like stabs and ad-libs, because I think again they can clutter it a lot of the time. Like, you know, totally remove stabs and stuff like that sometimes when I'm mixing, because I feel like the artist is putting them in there because, you know, maybe he's not confident and loud enough or whatever, and he wants it to feel more aggressive, but then when I mix it, it comes out exactly how it is. That you can see here, this stab is very low in the mix. So if anything, it's just more for vibe. And obviously he wasn't a big ad-lib guy, so he didn't add any ad-libs. So let's have a quick listen to the vocal.
Got a screw loose and it didn't help listening to drill. Put a Black and Decker in my wheel when it's real. I can kill your baby like the pill if I feel. Darker than the Navy and I sing like I'm Seal. High notes deep.
We're just gonna use this section here.
Cheese. Funny how much
transitions through the mix. Again,
cheese. Funny.
When I'm mixing vocals, I'll want to mix over transitional periods as the beat changes, because I want to make sure that I'm leveling it all right. And then if I need to use automation to bring certain sections up or down as the record progresses, I can do that. But you know, if you just are mixing with like 2 bars and you're not listening to the whole verse back and forth or in different transitions, you might mix it in the wrong pocket for like the overall vibe of the record. So with the stems, with this vocal, sorry, the first plugin I've got, again, it's just the EQ. I've topped and tailed, and then I've done a little boost around 1K. I've probably done that boost later on, just me trying to like drive into a certain plugin. I'm not sure why I used that particular plugin, but that would have been like an afterthought when I'm just balancing it. Sometimes when I'm finishing a mix, I'll put on like my Apple headphones or like my AirPods, and I'll run a Streamliner plugin on there to sort of like emulate Spotify. And then I'll be listening, I'll be like, okay, 90% of the population are going to be listening to the music like this, like what's missing. And so I might do small adjustments at the back end like that, just because I felt like maybe his vocals need to come out at 1K when it's gone through the Spotify codec and it's being played back through Apple earbuds. Do you see what I'm saying? So trying to get it in the best light, not for like my well-treated room with my brilliant speakers, like for what everyone else is going to be listening to it at, which is like like mid-tier, if not low-tier speaker headphones in like bad environments and codecs on Spotify and all that stuff. So I always think it's important to mix into your limitations rather than, you know, mix to the best of your ability and then get limited by those limitations, if you see what I'm saying. Next, we got a Pro Q3. I've just gone down here and I've basically dynamic EQ'd a bunch of like resonant frequencies that were popping out in his vocals that I wanted to smooth out.
Funny how my gender snatch your soul like the gypsy.
I have taken off these ones because, and I remember because later on I'm de-essing and I felt like I was sort of choking it. So I removed them from here and I just allowed de-esser to do the work rather than de-essing in the EQ and then de-essing in the de-esser. Then we have a little bit of mouth here. This is just a really cool plugin that RX that's sort of like, if there's a lot of mouth movement in a record, it will move it so you can hear like it's already taken out 6 clicks. So it basically just scans and tries to duck those particular mouth movement. Super, super good plugin, and it's very useful when it comes to dealing with like rap and stuff like that, because sometimes you can't cut those frequencies out or you can't automate those frequencies because they're too close and to the thing. This has a very unique and kind of crazy way of like dealing with that for you, especially if it was like a bad recording. Not that this was a bad recording, but yeah, you get my point. So you can see here, I've narrowed in the de-esser and I've just set the threshold and I'm just doing like those, you know, very high S's between 9 and 16K. I try not to like too aggressively de-ess, especially when it comes to like rap, because I feel like people can de-ess too much and then it almost sounds like they have a lisp. So it's all about finding that right balance with the de-esser, in my opinion. And then we've got a multi-band on here again. This is sort of doing a bit of an extreme job.
Cheese. Funny how my gender snatch your soul like the gypsies. Bet you didn't know the higher powers could dig deep. No.
So here, it's trying to be tight on the low end. Here, this band's not really doing much. Then I'm trying to boost up that sort of like high mid area to bring a bit of clarity. And then over here, there's quite an extreme sort of like de-esser going on. So it's like pushing it right down, but bringing it up at the same time. Not a multi-band that I would use anymore. Again, I'll update in a newer video. This isn't how I would multi-band anymore. I've sort of like, you know, improved, if you will. Just like you guys are watching this video to learn, I'm constantly learning as well, and I'm constantly progressing. And I have a much more solid system of multi-band compression now, and you know, as always, a greater understanding of how to optimize the tool and get the most out of the tool. Next, I'm just running it through this channel strip, the SSL channel strip. Everyone loves this channel strip. We got a boost at 10K, just doing a bit of EQing, a little boost around, what's that, like 1.2 hertz. Again, just trying to get that clarity out of the vocal. I've got a small bit of compression going on here as well, and there's a bit of a low end cut there as well. You know, again, this is, you see this all the time on everyone's plugins. Like running it through channel strips is super useful. Just it creates a vibe and it like gives the vocal a sound and a texture that a lot of people are trying to achieve. I've started to use the API a lot more than the SSL. This kind of like shows me just how long ago I mixed this record. But yeah, but definitely the SSL is valid. Like some of the best engineers in the world still use that plugin, and you know, obviously if you're lucky enough to have the actual desk, then I would definitely be using it, you know? So what do we have here next? Now we're running it through the 1176 compressor. This is one of the different variations. Sometimes I'll just play about, like obviously you've got the Bluey, the Blackie, I think it's called, and then there's this version as well. I might just try out a bunch of different compressors and see which one I think sounds the nicest on the given vocal. This, I'm sort of, because of how hot the record was getting into that point, I don't feel like it needed that much compression because it was giving a lot of compression anyway. It's quite a fast attack and a slower release, really trying to caption that energy and that feeling in the vocal so it sounds aggressive and it sounds up front. Whilst you're listening to it, it's a grind sort of technique, and it keeps that listener engaged and gives it that feeling. Like it's one of the more different ways of mixing, like what, you know, grime does. Then when you're looking at like American rap, it might be a lot smoother and a lot more slower type of compression. Then we have Fresh Air, just bringing a bit of air to it. Again, I tend to do this sort of stuff and I'll reference heavily on other systems because, you know, I feel like my particular room, sometimes it feels brighter than what it is when it gets translated. So you know, if I'm running a bit hot to my ears on the vocal in this room, then I'm probably in the right place. So I tend to, you know, use other speakers and stuff like that when I'm doing these last adjustments on the vocals. And then that's going into a final EQ where I'm just doing any last little bits of tweaking and stuff. As you can see here, I've re-gone in on the de-esser there after I've added that fresh air in, because that fresh air is going to bring up all of those top end frequencies, but again, it's also gonna bring out some of the S's again. I'm just retaining those at that point with, you know, a very tight Q, doing a little boost and then just recontrolling on some of the low ends. So that was the EQ. And then lastly in the actual chain is another light compression, and I've slowed down the attack and the release just to sort of like almost act as a sandpaper to the recording, just smooth out all of those edges, just help it like sit into the mix more. And then on the buses, I've just got the old standard, old faithful Valhalla reverb, quick little chain there. Make sure you're EQing your reverbs. Again, I would probably now tend to actually physically add another EQ and EQ them before they get into the reverb. I much prefer that technique. And then lastly, we have a delay, just a 1/8 lo-fi, quite chill on the feedback, done a low pass and a high pass. And that's just sort of like helping the record bounce and give it like an extra vibe to it. So let's just have a listen to the whole verse and yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Dead faces in my cabin.
Got a screw loose and it didn't help listening to drill.
To be fair, I'll probably get Harry to shorten that a little bit because I just realized I don't want to get stricken on YouTube and get it taken down by copyright for a song that I worked on. But that is basically the overview of the mix of My Fears by Clue, featuring Wrecker, Swiss, and Wretch 32. I'll have the link below to the record, so please go and check that out. I'll also have Young Soul's information linked below as well, and the part 1 of this video where he breaks down how he made the beat. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Let me know if you have any questions or if you want me to go into any further details. I will. Apologies again, this is an older mix, so my techniques and my style has changed a bit since this record. That being said, I hope you liked it. Make sure you like. If you're not subscribed yet, please subscribe. It really does help out the channel. Leave a comment if you have any questions or if you want any more info or any ideas on any videos or anything. I'm here, I'm in the comments and I'm listening, and I will get that done for you. That being said, I will catch you guys in the next one. Safe. Boom.